Hello, I'm Martin. Nice to see you. It's National Storytelling Week and I'm really missing being with you in real life to tell stories with you in the pub and in the orchard. But I thought I'd record a story for you today, and it's a story not from around here. I'm in a little old church at the edge of Bridgid, near where I live. It's a story from the far north where Monkey John lives. But it is a story about this time of year, and one of the reasons why I love National Storytelling Week, it holds significance really for me, is because it always spans that time from the end of January to the beginning of February. It's a time when we just begin to move from the sitting around the fires in midwinter towards a little tiptoe towards spring, the beginning of spring. And this is a story about that time of year. Today is the 1st of February, and it's known, particularly in Ireland and Scotland, but also in England, it's known as Bridgid's Day or St. Bridgid's Day, and it is heralded as the very beginning of spring. But it starts not with Bridgid, but with the Cailleach. The Cailleach is exactly as she sounds. She's cold, and cruel, and capricious. She is the ancient, haggard, Celtic goddess of winter. And she's as fierce as frost. She rules over the dark half of the year when the land is still and stark and lifeless. And she lives in the far north, in the mountains of Scotland. And it's said that she created those mountains by hurling huge boulders around the land whilst riding on a great grey goat. And the biggest of those strewn stone summits is Ben Nevis. And in the cold confines of the craggy mountain of Ben Nevis, there the Cailleach has made her home in a place which never really finishes being winter. And every year at the beginning of November, she takes her pleated dresses and she goes and washes them in the sea, in the wild waters of the Cailleach whirlpool. And when her dresses are sparkling white, she takes them and she drapes them over the tops of the mountains as a fresh covering of vestal snow. And over the years, the Cailleach, from time to time, has taken young women to be her servants, to attend to all her demands and desires. And one year, long ago, she captured a beautiful, springing young maiden called Bridgid. And as much as the Cailleach was cold, grey and withered and wizened, with an icy demeanour, while Bridgid was warm, springing, kind, with smooth skin and leaf-green eyes. And because of those differences, the Cailleach despised Bridgid. She treated her worse than a slave. She gave her ever more difficult tasks and laborious chores to achieve. And one winter, at the beginning of January, she took a dirty brown fleece. She gave it to Bridgid and said, "Wash this in the waterfall behind the mountain." Bridgid did as she was commanded. She took the dirty fleece and she washed it for day and night until her arms were aching and her fingers were red raw from the icy water. But even though she washed and the water turned brown, the fleece refused to be cleaned. And on the third day, she noticed standing beside her by the waterfall was an old man with snow-white hair, white beard and pale blue eyes beneath bushy brown eyebrows. And he looked at Bridgid and he asked her what she was doing, and when she told him her story, he nodded his head gently and he said, "What's been tainted by the old woman of winter can only be cleaned by the old man of winter. Give me the fleece. Let me see what I can do." Gladly, Bridgid gave the old man the fleece, and he took it, and with 3 flicks of his wrists, the fleece, the water, dirty brown, came arcing out into the air, and there the fleece itself was sparkling white, as clean as snow. He gave it back to Bridgid, and she thanked him with all the warmth in her heart, and she was turning to go back to see the Cailleach when he paused. He bent down to a patch in the snow, and he picked a little posy of delicate, drooping white flowers. He gave them to Bridgid and said, "Give these to my sister, the Cailleach, and tell her this: the buds are bursting in the forest, and underneath the white snow, green shoots are emerging." Bridgid took the flowers and she thanked the old man. She returned to the Cailleach. She laid the clean fleece in front of her, but the Cailleach had eyes only for the white flowers. "Where did you get those?" she asked accusingly. And Bridgid paused and said, "In the land beyond the waterfall, for there the buds are bursting in the forest and green shoots appearing beneath the white snow." The Cailleach froze, icy anger, and then burst into a storm of fury. Her blustery cries and shrieks, they echoed from the walls of the halls of her mountain, and then out she rode on her great grey goat. She took a bludgeon of blackthorn wood, and as she rode in a storm of fury around the lands, around the mountains, she beat down the green shoots and she snapped off the buds from the branches, and her fury was so wild and tempestuous that it carried across the land and over the sea, even as far as the Green Isle, to Tir Nanog, and there, in the land of youth, was the youthful lord of summer, Angus Orc, lying in his bed of furs, tossing and turning, and in his dreams he'd seen the beautiful, bright Bridgid. And in his dreams he'd known that his own mother, the Cailleach, had trapped her in the mountains, and as her stormy cries reached him and he opened his eyes, in his heart he knew with a deep desire that he must reach and free Bridgid. He saddled his own milk-white mare, he jumped on the horse and began to ride out of his own land with sun-yellow hair and golden cape flying behind him across the sea and into the land of Scotland to the edge of the mountains. But there, the Cailleach seen him coming. She redoubled all of her winter strength and stormy fury. She sent snow blizzards and icy hail and wild winds, and they flew against Angus, and he couldn't ride any further towards the mountain. But then he remembered, as one of the Cailleach's own offspring, he had his own intrinsic magic and seasonal spells. He brought forward from summer 3 days. 3 days of gentle, warm weather from August, and they replaced the winter's days, and he was able to ride towards the mountain to find Bridgid, and he freed her. And she'd seen his travelling across the land and battles against the elements, and the two fell into each other's arms. And the strength of their newly growing love was enough to quicken the spring all around the lands, around the mountain. Now the blanket of white was changing to a carpet of green. Yellow flowers of primroses and celandines and aconites, they crowned the land. And as they rode on together towards the forest, the first tree in the forest, a large tree, it burst into green leaf. And in its branches the first bird of spring, a linnet, began to sing. And Bridgid stopped to look into the branches, and she blessed the little bird. And she called it the little bird of Bridgid. And the linnet is still called the little bird of Bridgid. And that day, as the spring took hold, was the first day of February. And it's still celebrated this day as Bridgid's day, as Bridgid's day, as St. Bridget's day. And it's a day when we welcome in the first flowers, the tiptoeing towards spring, the beginning of spring. But as for the Cailleach, where she rode away from the mountain with the light and life that Angus and Bridgid had brought, and she went to the dim and distant mountains on the Isle of Skye, and there she waited and bided her time. But she wasn't finished, because those 3 days of winter hadn't been used up. And so it is. Sometimes in spring, in March or early April, the Cailleach rides out again on her great grey goat with a blackthorn bludgeon, beating down the green shoots and snapping off the buds from the branches. So be careful. Even as today we celebrate the beginning of spring, watch out, because the Cailleach will be back. So, good luck with you and all your stories and all your places. I'm going to celebrate Bridgid today. Light a little candle and put it in the window, a little posy of flowers, and I'm going to hang a little cross that's going to go to celebrate the beginning of spring.